to speak this week about the question of when to light Chanukah candles because it is somewhat relevant for this week. Now it's a big topic because there are, I would say, three main sugyas that we need to speak about concerning the question of where to light Chanukah candles. One of them is the main sugya in the Gemara. Okay, the Gemara had the sugya in which we discussed, the Gemara discussed it, Rishonim discussed what's the right place to light your Chanukah candles. This dispute or this controversy didn't start today. It's already all the way back in the Gemara. But beyond that, we have another big issue of where to light Chanukah candles nowadays. And what's the difference nowadays and then? Well, the answer is that there was something in the middle called Shash Sakana, a time of danger. And because of this time of danger, people stopped lighting where they would, according to the Gemara, the Lachatchila place, and started lighting indoors. And then the question is, what happens today? Can you still light indoors? As on the way in, we mentioned, Hasidim, right? Often light indoors. And we'll see some remarkable shittas about lighting indoors even today. And what's the status of that today? And then the third question is a question which is a more, really modern day question. And that is, what happens when you live in one of these towers, a high tower? Anything above the fourth, definitely the fifth floor, is going to be above 20 amas. And as we know, above 20 amas, Chazal say, people don't see. You don't see from Rosh Hashanah. So where should someone light his Hanukkah candles when he's living on the fourth or the fifth floor? I used to live on the fourth floor, and I measured from my balcony. It was really borderline. It was like 20 amas, like really borderline. So fourth floor is often going to be borderline, I suppose. Fifth floor is, I think, definitely going to be above 20 amas. And then the question will be, where do people who live high up, which is becoming much more common, all right? Certainly in Israel, the trend is towards binyan lagova, building up, and therefore that's another issue. In Bnei Brak, there's a great deal of objection to building high towers. So somebody once told me that he's assuming it's because of Hanukkah issues, but no. It's not because of Chanukah issues. It's actually because of, anyone want to take a guess why? Shabbos elevators, Shabbos lifts. Bnei Brakas are worried about their chumras with Shabbos lifts, and building up will have to force them to rethink the chumras, and that would take the spice out of life. So we're going to start with the main sugya, okay, which is Shabbos Chaf Aleph. As we know, B'Maimon Madlikin. We'll speak a little bit about the Shittas Rishonim, and we'll speak a little bit about the Psak Halacha. Very complicated, and I think it's a kind of a hallmark of many D'Rabbanans. From my experience in learning sugyas of D'Oraisas and D'Rabbanans, often in D'Rabbanans, the framework, the definitions, the way in which we kind of reach conclusive statements about how you're going to fulfill the mitzvah are much less firm than in D'Oraisas. In D'Rabbanans, often the definitions are a little bit more hazy. It depends a lot on tradition. Certainly Chanukah, till it became solidified as a fully, obligatory halachic principle, it took time. Yeah, we can admit it. And therefore, in D'Rabbanans generally, I remember learning once Mamet Shloshton on the Sugya Maseches Gittin, about how to transfer a debt. If I owe someone money and we want to transfer the debt from myself to someone else, right? If he owes me, so from me to someone else, you once you get in, you get lost. It's the D'Rabbanans are something very complicated, and this is a good example of it. Where exactly are you supposed to light your Hanukkah candles? So let's start from the sugya, okay? The Gemara, this is on the first page, page Aleph. I took these notes, by the way, from a site called Olamot, which is very useful. and very, very presentable and nice. So, Tana Rabbanon, Ner Chanukah mitzvah lanich al Pesach Beisai, right? Al Pesach Beisai mibachutz. So, sounds very clear, right? There's a mitzvah to place your Ner Chanukah outside the doorway to your home. On the outside, and if you're living in an attic, right, upstairs, then you put it on your window. And if it's dangerous, then you put it on your window, and that's it. What's the danger, by the way? The danger, Rashi explains, was that the local Ovdei Avodah Zarah, the Prasim in this case, had a chayk b'yom Edom. If Chanukah fell at the same time as their festival, then there was a chayk, there was a law, the only place where you were allowed to light a flame, a candle, a light, was in Ner Avodah Zarah, and therefore there was a tangible danger to light one in Jewish homes. So what do we see over here? We see over here that the mitzvah is to light it at the entrance to the door, at the entrance to your home. So it seems. If you don't live downstairs, you live upstairs, then you put it on your window. Let's leave it there for now, for this Gemara. Even here, before we get to other sources, there's a very important machlokes between Rashi and Tosfos about how to understand what does it mean Pesach Beisai Mibachutz. How do we understand these words? So Rashi learns, and I suppose this is the simple way to understand the Gemara. Mibachutz, says Rashi, Mishum Persuma Nisa V'loi B'Reshus HaRabim. Don't put it in the public domain, because then it wouldn't be the doorway to your home. Right? The mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is Ner Ish Ubeisai. It's a family mitzvah. It's a mitzvah of the light of our homes being projected out into the public domain. So it has to be, says Rashi, not in the public domain outside, but next to my doorway. And where is that? In the courtyard. Says Rashi, homes were open to a courtyard. Right, just like in Yerushalayim, many apartment blocks are somehow linked together into some common yard, common courtyard that houses all of these different buildings. So they had yards, they had chatzirot, and the Pirsum Nisa, according to Rashi, would be that you light your Chanukah lights outside your house, your home, and the light is seen, is visible to all of the occupants of the common courtyard. Can it be seen from the street? Maybe, but not necessarily. And Rashi is not bothered by that. Says Rashi, you don't put it in the Reshus HaRabim, you put it outside your home, and it's visible to all the other occupants of the common, of the shared courtyard. All clear, right? That's Rashi's opinion. Tosfos says not like this. Tosfos says, Mitzvah lanich al Pesach Beisai Mibachutz u'mayri deleka chotzer. What's this case in which the Gemara says that you place it at your own doorstep, right, of your home, only if there's no yard there? And a bayis omet samach l'Reshus HaRabim. You have a house that has a direct entry from the street, from the public domain, as many private houses do. For example, houses in Ramat Bed, many private homes, have a direct entrance from the Reshus HaRabim, which can be visible from the Reshus HaRabim. And then you light your Chanukah candles outside your home. You can see it from the Reshus HaRabim. Everything's good. However, says Tosfos, Aval im yesh chotzer lifnei habayis, then mitzvah laniach al Pesach chotzer. Then the right place to light the Chanukah candles is at the entrance to the yard, and not at the entrance to your own home, right? And Tosfos brings two proofs to this from Gemara later on. One of them refers to Chotzer she'esh shnei psachim, a courtyard that has two openings needs two neighbors. So it seems very clear from this Gemara that this has to be at the entrance to the yard and not at the entrance to your personal home. It brings another raya from Shnei Pios. I'm not sure if we'll have time to speak about the rayas and how Rashi might answer the rayas. The Achronim here are busy to explain how is Rashi going to deal with the rayas brought by Tosfos. But one way or the other, what we have over here is a significant machlokas between Rashi and Tosfos concerning where is it that we have to light Chanukah candles. Now, I'm sure you all think of the question, famous Gemara in Baba Kama. Is it brought over here? No. But it's a famous Gemara in Baba Kama. And the Gemara in Baba Kama says that if a person has a store, all right, if a person has a store and he leaves his Chanukah candles outside the store, and then somebody comes with a camel and straw and causes a fire and there's damage, famous story, and then the Gemara says that he's potter, meaning the store owner that left the candle outside, he's potter. Why is he potter? Because he did a Bereshus mitzvah, because there's a mitzvah to put your candles outside. And this is a problem, because according to Rashi, he should have put the candles inside the courtyard, not outside on the street. What are the candles doing outside on the street? So this is a question that several Rishonim speak about. Some of them are mentioned over here. The Ritva, for example, on page 2, the Ritva is busy here with Rashi. He asked this question on Rashi, and he gives an answer that according to Rashi, Rashi doesn't mean to put it right next to your door, but rather you need to put it next to somewhere in between. He says, we look at the end of the Ritva. According to Rashi, you mustn't put it outside in the public domain. You have to put it in the yard, but close to the entrance to the yard. So the Ritva is in effect bringing Rashi much closer to Tosfos, right? Because of this question, says the Ritva, even according to Rashi, you're not supposed to be putting your Chanukah candles all the way in the innermost parts of the yard where nobody outside can see it, but you're supposed to be putting it pretty close to the public domain where camels passing by might burn their load. That's a chiddush of the Ritva, but others say in Rashi a different pshat, and I think it's an interesting pshat. The Smag and others say in Rashi's opinion that even according to Rashi, that the main mitzvah is to place your Chanukah candles by your home, by the doorway to your house. Nonetheless, there's still a persuma nisa. There's still a mitzvah to be mefarsim the nes by placing Chanukah candles in the public domain. And someone who does so is therefore potter. And I found from here an interesting source for the Chabad minhagim and others to make all of these, Chanukah candles in the middle of nowhere, Times Square.
Stick to your car roof.
Car stickers, yes, car roof, absolutely. What does that have to do with Chanukah, right? Well, the answer is based on this Smag and others in Das Rashi. It's also in the Re'im. It is To'af Yisrael, one of the Hirushim to Sefer. Where's the Re'im? No, didn't bring it here. It's not brought here. But in any case, they say in Das Rashi that even according to Rashi, that the main mitzvah is by your doorstep. There's still an Indian Tosefes mitzvah to publicize the miracle as much as possible, and therefore you get a p'tor. That's the problem.
So therefore, the only thing you're left is
but why do you have a p'tor? If there's no mitzvah, then why does the guy have an exemption? There must be an extra angle, right? There must be an extra angle. But it's a chiddush that angle exists, outside of the principal mitzvah of lighting your.
But at least it's also why Rush would say that when there's kids left out on the streets, it's more peaceful.
Well, I mean, yes, in a way, but it's still a very big chiddush, meaning, but it's like two dinim in Chanukah. There's one din of the main mitzvah, and there's another din of making a appearance from outside. Okay, I mean, fair enough. Again, Chabad have a precedent from the idea of lighting in shul. Lighting in shul is a minute. Is a minute. And there's a big question and controversy whether you make a bracha and to what degree you can. I was once at a Chanukah lighting at the Supreme Court of Israel, no less. And I was honored to do the lighting, and the question was, do you make the bracha or not? Well, the minhag hamacha was to make the bracha, so, but it wasn't, and yesh al milismach. It wasn't like I didn't have a milismach. Yesh al milismach, but it's a real circular. It's not a simple issue at all. For many of the people there, that was also their only halacha. So it's not Neri Shavesa, but they live in more than they live at home. Alcohol panim. How do we pass them concerning this machlekes between Rashi and Tosfos? So Shulchan Aruch, page 3 over here. Shulchan Aruch passes like Tosfos. Says Shulchan Aruch Ner Chanukah Seif Hey, right? In Matafresh and Aleph. Ner Chanukah Menichal Pesach Hasamach Lishas Rabim Mipachot, right? Which is the last of the Gemara. Im Bais Pasol Lishas Rabim Menichal Pesach. If we mish Chatzel if Ner Bais Menichal Pesach He Chatzel. So very clearly, Tosfos rules, the Shulchan Aruch rules like Tosfos. If you live in an aliyah and you don't have a Pesach which is open to Rishas Harabim, then you put it on your at your window. So says the Shulchan Aruch, and the Bir Halacha says fairly clearly that the Shulchan Aruch is ruling not like Rashi. According to Rashi, you're supposed to be lighting the Chanukah candles at the doorway to your house. Shulchan Aruch says no. You light the candles at the entrance to the communal yard, right, to the courtyard, and not at the entrance to your house. It's interesting. The Aruch HaShulchan asks on the Shulchan Aruch. There are so many Rishonim that ruled like Rashi, including, it seems, the Rambam. The Rambam just brings the wording of the Gemara verbatim. And the simple wording of the Gemara, Pesach Beisoi, your home, sounds like Rashi. Tosfos has to say, no, Pesach Beisoi is in when there's no yard. But if there's a yard, then it's the entrance to your yard. Just brings the lashon of the Gemara, sounds very much, and the Rambam is passing like Rashi. And the Aruch HaShulchan, he really asks, he mentions this, says the Aruch HaShulchan, and he asks, how is it that the Rashi, the Ran, the Rambam, the Reed, the Smal, and the others, the Gos Maimoni, how is it that the Shulchan Aruch omitted this opinion altogether? And he says, the Tzarachian, he says, Alko Panim, that's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. And then the question becomes, what do you do today? All right, let's skip a couple of 1,000 years over here and get to questions of what we're supposed to be doing today. Soon we'll speak about the additional question of Shas Sakana, what happens because of the danger issue and the minhag to light indoors. But let's leave that aside for a moment, okay? Without the minhag to light indoors, what would be the appropriate place to light? The main issue, the main problem, I mean, the answer would seem to be, what's the question? Do like Shulchan Aruch, right? Minhag Yisrael to follow Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah doesn't argue. So, okay, we've got Aruch HaShulchan. What about all these Rishonim? Nice question. But we've got a straight psak of the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah doesn't answer. All seems very clear. Well, it's not so clear. And why is it not so clear? Because our reality today is a very different reality in terms of urban life than the reality of Chazal. Specifically, our chatzerot, our chatzeros are substantively different from the chatzeros that they had then. And this is a halacha that comes up in many places. For example, in Baba Basra concerning questions of hezek re'iyah meaning urban planning. Can you open windows to a person's courtyard and so on? Chazal were very, very busy with this. And the reason why they were so busy is because in Chazal's time, and you still see this in certain areas maybe of Yerushalayim, the very old areas where you know, or in less modern societies, that the Chatzar was a real place of living. People used to do a lot of their everyday life, everyday chores, everyday activities would be done in the Chatzar, in this common yard. The ideas of privacy that we're used to today were less prevalent. They were prevalent in slightly different ways in terms of hezek re'iyah, but the type of privacy that we tend to enjoy nowadays was less common, less vogue in terms of Chazal. And the yard, the common yard that was a Chatzar Habatim, was a communal space to be used for everyday stuff like laundry and, you know, hanging stuff up and cooking, yes, and cooking, and of course going to the bathroom, right? Using the toilet. Where did you do that? You know, in the outhouse, as it used to be called, and so on. Meaning that's where people lived to a large degree. It was in this communal area, and therefore a Chatzar had a certain significance of living there that we don't have today. All right, what's our Chatzar today? For example, one of the questions that poskim grapple with is, how do we look at the stairwell of a building? All right, the stairwell of a building. You have an apartment building, an apartment block that has, you know, if it's tall, it can have 20 stories and you know, 60 apartments. And if it's a regular one, so it's got 4 stories and it's got 10 apartments, however much it has, how do you classify the building? Is that called a chatzar or not? I mean, what do you do there? Basically nothing. You just walk through. All it is a convenient way of getting into all kinds of apartments on a number of floors. But it's not a place that you actually make use of for your everyday life. And therefore, is it called a chatzar or isn't it called a chatzar? That's one of the big questions. And that will obviously change a lot of how we're looking at the mitzvah of lighting Chanukah candles based on this machlokes of Rashi and Tosfos. So Rav Shlomo Zalman already writes, brought in a great Masoris on this, because for many years we were just lighting indoors, and we'll get to that later, whether nowadays that remains an option or not. But in at least from the time of the beginnings of the return to Eretz Yisrael, where people lived here, and clearly here there's no sakana, it's a Jewish yishuv, and therefore the default is you go back to the Shulchan Aruch. Well, where are you supposed to light? What's the ideal place to light? So
private chatzar would be just an extension of the home. So gated to the private chatzar, it's like your front door.
Well, yes, absolutely. If you have a private chatzar, a private meaning it's your garden, your front garden, then it would seem that the ideal place would be at the outside of the front garden. However, if your front door is also visible to the public domain, then that would also be very good, because you have Rashi, it's a doorway to your house, and you also have Tosfos because it can be seen from the public. It's in the public domain, even though maybe Tosfos would say, well, the best place would be at the doorway to the chatzar, but it would seem to be that if your front door is clearly visible, then that would be good. However, if your front door is not visible and you have a garden, then certainly the best it would be outside the garden, where it can be seen to Bnei Rosh Hashanah. So, first of all, one of the big issues that many poskim are busy with is, there's a Chazon Ish on this. The Chazon Ish, he said very clearly that our chatzeros do not have a din of a chatzar because it's not used, and therefore Chazon Ish said that nowadays you mustn't light at the chatzar. Our chatzeros are not chatzeros, and therefore you mustn't light at the chatzar at all. Even I think over here in Derech Hamuna, the stairwell, yes. So the Chazon Ish didn't like stairwells. He said, don't light at your door towards the stairwell, and don't light at the bottom of your stairwell. He didn't like this because he said the stairwell doesn't have a din of a chatzah. So you can't light that. For example, many people you'll see, not like the Chazon Ish, many people light at the, I don't know many, but there are people who light at the bottom of the stairwell. Have you seen this? Right? Apartment buildings, outside the apartment building, sometimes you see like five menorahs, 5 boxes, glass boxes. Why? Because there are 5 people who live in this building. They all want to light at the entrance to the chotzer, right? The public stairwell is the chotzer, and therefore they light at the bottom where you can see it from the public domain, and it's at the entrance to the chotzer. Chazon Ish was very against that. He said that's no good. And why is it no good? Because the stairwell is not a chotzer. It doesn't represent me in any way. It's not a living space. And therefore, that's not a good place to light. And the Chazon Ish used to say, again, I won't start reading everything here inside, but this is a Derech Hamuna, Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And Rav Chaim Kanievsky says, quoting from Rav Chaim, quoting from the Chazon Ish, now the best thing is to light in the window. Best thing is to light at the window where it's visible to the public and it's clearly associated with your home, and that's the best place to light. What happens if you don't have a good window? That's a question that many speak about. One of the Sfarim here, Oz Nidbaru, which is Rav Binyamin Zilber, and he says, number one, it's best to light by the window. If not, then you should light at the door between your home and the stairwell. And then you have Pirsa to people coming in the stairwell, because at least you have Rashi, right? It's next to your home, it's next to your door. It's true that you don't have a very good Tosfos here because it's not visible to the public domain, but at least you have Rashi and the other Shitos Rishonim.
China was down to the Rashi itself, which is not good. He's very difficult, just too many. The whole thing is about 1,000.
Yes.
But he's limiting it, he assumed, because he's saying do it inside, not outside.
Correct.
That by itself is like a theory.
Well,
yes, it's because you privately you can understand where it's coming from, but he won't say it straight up.
Well, first of all, you're right, and that's what's bothering Tosfos.
Correct. There's another place that if you have to say it goes away to dash.
Outside the Chatzah. No, Tosfos has a lot of Pirsa.
Yes, more than Rashi.
Rashi has less Pirsa, and Rashi has a paradox, because on the one hand we know that it's Pirsa, but on the other hand it says Ner Ish Ubeisoi Pesach Beisoi. So Rashi says, how do we resolve this tension, this paradox? Says Rashi, we do Pirsa, but outside your house. So who does it? Who is it visible to? Your neighbors, right? Everyone that lives in this Chatzar, which is a lot of people, and each person that lives in Chatzar, right, will have the Pirsa for Bnei HaChatzar that he's living with. Now, in some cases, this will be visible from the public domain. In some cases, it won't. But that's not the main Pirsa. According to Rashi, it comes out that the main Pirsa for people who live in such a structure will be to the Bnei HaChatzar. It's true that according to Rashi, if you have a private home that's overlooking the Rosh Hashanah, then that's wonderful. You have both. But if you don't, right? But if you don't, then yes, your Pirsa is limited to the Chatzar. And yeah, there's no other way to resolve the issue of, on the one hand, Pesach Beisoi Mibachutz, and on the other, the fact that people lived in Chatzeres at the time. So that's what Rashi said. And Tosfos really doesn't like that Misvara. Tosfos is less good in the wording, right? Pesach Beisoi. Tosfos has to make a kinta. That's talking about a house that doesn't have a chatzah. But Tosfos is better in Svara because you have a Pirsa to the public domain. So
the point is that still Rashi makes that point specific. That's what it is.
Right. I mean, again, the Gemara tells us that Chanukah is Pirsa. So right, it's a minimalist approach.
I don't need the maximum pace, because there is a pace. So
but it's not even worse.
You see Rashi struggling with it.
Right.
that's what he
Yeah.
says. He said, not in Shiur, but
Now, the main bar plukta, if you want, of the Chazon Ish on this was Rav Elyashiv Zechron Levracha, and Rav Elyashiv said that for purposes of Chanukah, our Chatzeros are just like the Chatzeros of Chazal, and for Chanukah purposes, there's no difference at all. And many Sfarim are busy with Rav Elyashiv Shita. One of them is somebody called Rav Darzi in Shvus Yitzchak. Look at this on page 5 in the middle of the page. The Gimel Shulchan on Pasuk Yatesis said, "Luckily, Pesach Chatzah, Kshesh Pesach Chatzah, Tzarech lahadlik dafka sham, v'loy v'Pesach Habayis, afilu hu nireh heitem v'shus harabim." Says Rav Elyashiv, even in the case that we mentioned before, where you have a doorway to the house that can be seen from the public domain, the main place to light is Pesach Chatzah. V'chein hayam minig Yerushalayim, the Tshuvas Van Hagos, Rav Moshe Sternberg also mentions that the minig in Yerushalayim was to light always at the Pesach of Chatzeros, and that's the right place to light. Also, Rav Moshe Sternberg brings this also from the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav, Gris Soloveitchik, said that the halacha and Chatzeros are considered a chatzah for the purposes of Chanukah. Could be that for other purposes they're not. But for purposes of Chanukah, of Piras HaManes, our Chatzeros are like the ones back then. It doesn't make a difference. The Chazon Ish was a stickler for definitions. If it's not a Chatzah, then it's the wrong place to light.
That's the difference between Yerushalayim. It's in Yerushalayim that it's like in Yeshua and Mamish a chatzah. Even though there's a window on the outside, on the other side of the houses, that might
Right.
be to
Like Bate Ungarim, places like that, it's all real Chatzeros, absolutely.
But today we don't use them the way they were once. But
You know, the people in Bate Ungarim, I have a feeling they're somewhat still, not quite the same, but somewhat. Could be, meaning we see here there is a split, right? The minig Yerushalayim and the Yerushalmi Poskim, Shlomo Zalman, Rav Elyashiv, Brisker Rav, all Yerushalayim people.
Back up to that street, and there'll be more people passing by. But the Yashin is saying no. What's here? Panimis is not the answer.
Right. Absolutely. So,
why doesn't the Yeshiva Beis have to be connected directly to the house, like the people inside the house? The Yeshiva Beis. As it sounds like the other music, like once it's inside your house, now I now know there's an Yeshiva Beis.
well, this is again, this gets into the philosophy of mitzvahs Ner Chanukah. But I think that there's something very beautiful and something very significant about this, that the carriers of the tradition is the Ner Isha Beisa. It's our families, our family unit, like the Torah tells us in Yetzias Mitzrayim. We carry that light, and Chazal tell us that it has to shine from the home.
That's what
No, it's our light. It's our light that shines out. It can't be a summer light in the public domain. It has to be a Jewish light. And where does the light become Jewish from? From the home, not because it has a nice candelabrum, but because it's the light that shines forth, that is projected from the Jewish home. For whatever reason, that's how Chazal enacted it, right? And I think it has a strong svara, meaning on the one hand it's for Pesach and Ace on the outside, but on the other it has to be connected to us.
Doesn't that show that there you're trying to show someone that's not someone has this in his house, so you don't think someone has it? So
No, that's not the case of Chashad. Chashad, are you talking about the Chashad issue?
it sounds like
Someone has two doors. It's an
Yeah.
interesting question nowadays also with back doors. Yeah, maybe we'll get there, but we're really short of time, so I'm gonna push ahead with your permission. Pushing ahead. All right. So that's the big question of where to light. I will say that there are many people who actually do two. I think it's a fun thing to do two. You do three?
Both sides.
Okay.
Because I missed it. I see lights outside. That means I don't see the light.
Oh, so very good. I was exactly going to say this. For those who light outside, in the Pesach HaChotzeh or wherever they like, which it seems to be is an ideal, certainly according to the Yerushalayim school of thought. You're at home without your Chanukah candles. I'm sorry? The Gemara doesn't say this. And you don't have to. They didn't have a problem. It's not a problem. But it's very nice to have Chanukah candles in your living room. And especially because according to many poskim, by the way, Igros Moshe make the bracha on the outside, of course. The Igros Moshe says lighting by your window is fine. Like we see that Ben Aliyah can light by the window, and the window is a good for Simanisa. It's not the ideal again, if you have a chatur and so on. But certainly to light outside with the bracha and then to light again inside, I think adds a lot. No chiyuv to do it. But it adds, and if you have enough kids that each child wants to light, so you can allocate the different lightings, some here, and
just quickly coming to the point, the Gemara doesn't mention side here, but it's nice to have inside.
yes,
We mentioned already that shifting, uses of there, house, about 2,000 years. You had a one-room house, and like if it was in the Chotzer and 4 other people were lighting the Chotzer, you probably would have seen it. You couldn't have missed it. But now we have our houses and separate or high-rise buildings. Like it's a very different reality. They may not cross their mind because they would have sat in their house and they couldn't miss it.
well, number one, perhaps, but you do see it when you light it. You can't miss it when you're lighting it. So you see it then. And then you say, when you see it upon lighting it. And then later on, there's no chiyuv to see Chanukah candles. But I agree with you that it's very nice. I mean, you could say, wow, nowadays we have so many rooms and each kid goes to his own room, so we should light Chanukah candles in every room. I have nothing against, in principle, but, okay.
What if you live in a really deserted area where there's no one around at all? Alaska, Australia, decent tracks, some houses and remotes, whatever you want.
Right. Well, your public domain is what it is. That's something which you don't have control over, for better or for worse. So wherever your public domain is, that's what you have. It can be very relevant, though, for determining the time until which you're allowed to light Chanukah candle, because the share of time, the Gemara says, is Anchetichle Regel Menashuk, while there are people walking outside. So if you're living in Bnei Brak, there are people walking outside till 2 in the morning, so you can really light till really late. 2 in the morning is your shopping time in Bnei Brak. So then you're more or less okay till really late. But if you're living in Metula somewhere, I don't know, then past 7 o'clock, there's no one outside. I'm just guessing. I have no idea what really is going on in Metula right now. However, it depends where you live. So you have to light at a time between nightfall or Shiur, depends when you're on your minute, and the time when there are still people roaming outside. If you're in Alaska, people go to work, they come home at a certain time. There are people. So there's always some public domain. If you're living on a desert island, then you're in trouble. Yes. The presuminous is for the public, and that public is a public of everybody. Meaning it doesn't make a distinction or a discretion between Jews and non-Jews. So yes, like what Nasta said before, according to Rashi, it's members of your chatzar who might also be a bunch of non-Jews. Again, there's no distinctions made by Chazal or by poskim. Are they Jews or non-Jews? It's for the public. It's in order to publicize America. The shul is a specific minhag of lighting in shul, and then the question is, when was that minhag established and under what circumstances? That's only the question of the shul, not the main hadlok. That's the extra minhag of lighting in shul. Very briefly, what about the shas sakana? Right? We saw in the Gemara before that when there's a sakana, like Rashi said, in times of Avodah Zarah and so on, then you put it on your table. First of all, does that apply specifically to the sakana of Avodah Zarah, getting into trouble, or does it also apply when you have other problems? Right, let's say there's a storm outside, okay? Stormy weather. So it's very difficult to light outside. Is the halacha that when there's a storm, you can also light inside the dayan, or not? You have to wait until the storm abates to the degree that you can light outside, and then light outside, right? Do we say that other circumstances which are similar to sakana, in the sense that they technically don't allow you to light outside, are those the same or not? What kind of circumstances allow this? So first of all, we find the Brisker Rav is very explicit about this. He says, no way, the only thing is sakana. And therefore, he was a very big advocate of lighting outside. And he said, nowadays, there's like no excuse not to light outside, even if it's stormy, whatever it is, wait it out. He used to light, I think he lit inside, I don't know with a bracha or without, and then he waited for the strong winds to calm, and then he went outside and lit. And he said, it's only sakana, and that's it. However, there is a raya from, I'm not going to have time to read it out, but there is a raya from Rishonim, not like this. So Tosfos says that when there's a sakana, and therefore you light inside, then you're allowed to light even later than tichle regel min hashuk. All right, why? Because when you're lighting inside, who are you lighting for? The answer is, who are you doing Pesach Nisa to when you're lighting inside? To your bnei bayis, right? To the people living in your home. And there's a range of halachas here. When are they coming home, and so on? Okay, but the Pesach Nisa is for them, and therefore it doesn't matter when people are outside. All that matters is when people are inside. But what do we see from the Tosfos is that when it's not a shas sakana, then you can't light after tichle regel min hashuk, right? You can't light even if you're going to be lighting, even if the people in your bnei bayis are going to be seeing it and so on. It doesn't help. Meaning when it's not a shas sakana, according to this, it's binary, right? Either it's a shas sakana and then you're lighting for people at home, or it's not a shas sakana and then you're lighting for people outside, okay? And then people at home don't help, all right? That's according to Tosfos. However, the Ritva says not like this. The Ritva says that any person who doesn't light on time can light later on, just like shas sakana. So in the Ritva you see, now what do we see in the Ritva? The Ritva you see that even other circumstances can make it like a shas sakana. Right? The Ritva says, what happens if you missed it? It's too late. Says the Ritva, you know what? Light at home. So you see in the Ritva that if you're under circumstances where you can't light outside, either because of sakana or because it's too late, you can still light inside. It's b'diavad, but still, it's just by contrast with the Brisker Rav, who was very fiery against. He said no way, not yoti. Yeah, the Brisker Rav said not yoti. He said not yoti. We're back. No sakana, not yoti. Yeah, he was very. I think that's the Ritva's understanding of shas sakana. The Ritva's understanding that with shas sakana we can rely on a b'diavad. What's the b'diavad? Lighting at home. But that b'diavad isn't limited to a shas sakana. It's a b'diavad which is true universally. Whenever you can't light outside, you can light at home. That's how the Ritva understood the concept of shas sakana. It's a b'diavad. According to the Brisker Rav, that's not true. It's not there's a b'diavad lighting and a lechatchila lighting. There's a shas sakana lighting, and when it's not a shas sakana, there's no such thing as lighting indoors. But according to the Ritva, it seems not like that. That even not the shas sakana, that there is such a thing. In any case, it's fascinating to see the way that poskim relate to lighting indoors nowadays. There's a sefer called Dayan Yehoshua. Dayan Yehoshua was a Hasidic Yid who he was very close to Reb Aaron of Belz. So he Hasidic Yid from Amol, and he wrote a lengthy tshuva explaining why nowadays, today, okay, now, 21st century, if you light outside, he says, you're not yotzei. Amazing. He says, why? He says, because when Chazal said that b'shas sakana you light indoors, then when there is a shas sakana, and there was presumably for many years, and the minhag became to light indoors, then that cancels the original takana to light outdoors. I think that's absolutely remarkable. it's brought by a number of poskim. They bring it because it's a nice opening into the sugya, and obviously they argue with it. It's a remarkable daya, but we see again, why is he writing this tshuva? Because he wants to justify the minute. Hasidim continue to light indoors, and I think that this is also, like we said before, school of thought of Bnei Brak and Yerushalayim. This is school of thought of Hasidim versus the Litvish school of thought, which is, to use the Soloveitchik term, it's a mimetic tradition, meaning we do what our grandfathers did. The Hasidim, our grandfathers lit indoors. We're going to light indoors. That's what they did. That's what we do. Whereas the Litvaks, well, it's not the halacha. The halacha, you look at the books, the state Andrish. So we're going to do what the halacha is, to light outdoors. Again, what is halacha, right? Is halacha was steht in Sfarim, or is halacha was die Zeder hat getan? These are different approaches, and the Hasidim are very into the tradition. I have a friend, for him, speaking Yiddish is Yiddishkeit. He says it's just, can't imagine not speaking Yiddish. That's what Judaism is. That's the tradition, and a number of other things that I won't get into because I find them, more difficult than speaking Yiddish. But for him, that's what Yiddishkeit is, and so over here, I think that's really a very interesting difference. And of course, you have the Hasidim who are also into halacha, and they do both. Like Rav Moshe Weiss, for example, Rav Moshe Weiss. He has this Hasidic event, of course, from tradition, but he's also Ish Halacha. And therefore he does both. And Bracha makes outside. Another question of what to do with tall buildings, but another time.